Germany's so-called elite. The Führer's Guard. A black order. The end result is a crime the likes of which the world has never seen. An evening off in 1943. Relaxation from a strenuous job. The workplace of these men and women is called Sobibor, an extermination camp.
These were absolutely normal people, not different in any way at all.
Absolutely normal people. Their mission? Mass murder.
Photographs of the SS officers who were running Auschwitz tells the story of people who seem to feel very relaxed, having no moral qualms about what they were doing. In that way, they're rather shocking pictures, I think.
It could seem as if this is a job like any other, maybe more heroic and requiring more toughness, but nonetheless certainly not one that stigmatized you as a brute or as a sadist.
Thousands of Germans become murderers, most of them without qualms. Orders are orders, a betrayal of humanity. In Hitler's Germany, the SS is an attractive employer. Dashing, smart, elitist. 18-year-old Harry Seidel wants to be part of it too.
My sister raved about it. Wow, she said, there were SS men there. They're such good-looking guys, strong and hard-working and clean-looking. Wonderful uniforms. You have to go there, she said. So, stupidly, I enlisted.
Harry Seidel joins the SS Death's Head units, the guards at the concentration camps. A safe job. One that gets you admired.
For the concentration camp guards and people at the bottom, these were usually people who had been unemployed during the Great Depression, or even earlier with the Great Inflation. Families had lost their savings, their fortunes.
I don't think it was just unemployment, just the search for a job. Like with so many questions about what motivated the SS men, that was just one motive among many others. They were uniformed, they were armed. These were all attractive features, and they had an extreme amount of power. A degree of power over the prisoners that is completely unimaginable to us today.
By the end of the 1930s, the power of the SS has been concentrated into three branches: the General SS, the Verfügungstruppe, and the Death's Head units. The leader of the Death's Head units is Theodor Eicke. He has a criminal record, no school-leaving qualifications, and has failed several times in his attempts to become a policeman. He sees his troop as the elite of the SS, selected to guard the most dangerous enemies of the state.
We know that Eicke wanted to recruit people who were very young. He preferred people under 20 that haven't had jobs and careers and families, so that basically the SS is their family.
The Death's Head is their symbol. The SS did not invent it. Pirates and armies have used it for centuries. Intimidation and a demonstration of power. But with the SS, the Death's Head and Germanic runes take on new significance. They stand for racial mania and mass murder.
It's also a way of identifying yourself. We are the toughest of the tough. We are the ones who are really, willing to go very, very, very far. And I think this martial aura does something to the victims. We are dangerous and are perceived as dangerous.
That didn't bother us at all, that we had a skull and crossbones up there as a cockade on our cap. We were proud of it. I'm sorry, that's how it was.
Were they simply naive? In 1938, the Death's Head units numbered around 9,000 men. The Dachau concentration camp near Munich, a model for all SS camps, the school of violence, praised by propaganda.
Schieber und Verbrecher werden in großen Lagern interniert.
Dachau has two main tasks: the training of personnel and the torture of prisoners. Communists, homosexuals, Sinti and Roma, and Jews. Imprisoned and tortured simply because they do not fit into the Nazis' worldview. Death's Head unit recruits are specifically incited and encouraged to inflict abuse and violence. The aim of this is to break down inhibitions, to eliminate compassion. Anyone who hesitates is branded a coward.
I believe that comradeship and esprit de corps played a very central role for the Death's Head units. It was this being violent together and doing things together that actually far exceeded the realm of the norm. I'd see things like that as defining features of Eike's school of violence.
Following the example of Dachau, the regime sets up more camps. In early 1939, 60,000 Germans are subjected to arbitrary violence. The men in the Death's Head units are trained at Dachau, Buchenwald and Sachsenhausen. Harry Seidel is commanded to go to Sachsenhausen. He has no reservations about it.
Orders are orders. And they'd hammered that into us so much that we didn't think anything of it at first. We carried them out. So, I don't want to complain. I was satisfied. I like being an SS man.
The many minor offenders make the major crime possible in the first place. In 1939, Germany invades Poland.
Als alter Soldat des Weltkrieges befindet sich der Führer an der Front bei seinen Truppen. Im Hauptquartier informiert sich über den Fortgang der Kampfhandlungen.
In the conquered territories, the Wehrmacht and the SS begin to hunt people down. Civil servants, professors, teachers, priests, and above all, Jews. Within half a year, more than 100,000 Polish citizens are murdered or deported to camps.
The system changed again in the war as the camps became a source of labour, either very cheap or slave labour, forced labour at any rate, when inmates were supplied to run factories, particularly, of course, munitions factories.
New camps are built. A web of injustice extends across Hitler's growing empire. By the end of the war, there will be over 1,000 main and sub-camps. The largest camp is originally an artillery barracks west of Krakow, Auschwitz.
Verrecken vor Hunger, das interessiert sich nur so weit, als wir sie als Sklaven für unsere Kultur brauchen.
This part of Auschwitz, referred to as the Stammlager or main camp by the SS, is not initially designed for mass murder. Polish prisoners of war, intellectuals and Nazi opponents are held here, tortured and subjected to forced labor. Thousands die. Spring 1941. Germany prepares for the war against the Soviet Union. The regime is already planning Germanic dominion of the East.
As the planning for the invasion of the Soviet Union began, it was realized that, of course, once again, Germany was going to receive a large population of Jews, particularly, if they were successful, that they were successful quickly. And so the idea of actually dealing with this large population started to foment in the minds of the top Nazis.
June 22nd, 1941. The attack on the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. The war that Hitler always wanted. Teutons versus Bolshevists. Behind the front, the hunt for Jews begins again. The Nazi newsreel comments gloatingly,
Das Judenviertel von Jonava wird gesäubert. Auch hier terrorisierte das jüdische Gesindel die litauische Bevölkerung in der furchtbarsten Weise.
Racial mania and hate slogans are having an effect. During the first 6 months of the war, Einsatzgruppen of the SS and police battalions murder more than 1 million people. The perpetrators, who give orders, secure the areas and carry out the shootings, are often ordinary Germans who want to further their careers.
Certainly the officer corps was fairly carefully selected. And many people were angling to get assignments there because this was going to be the great chance to earn your spurs, gain promotion by action in the East. And the rank and file are very diverse. And some of them were, in fact, career SS people. Others are just very young, first time out of cadet school. Some are just order police that didn't have SS membership, but are put into an SS unit nonetheless. So I guess we could just say that for the Einsatzgruppen, the officers are pretty carefully selected. The rank and file is pretty random.
SS-man Harry Seidel is transferred from Sachsenhausen concentration camp to Einsatzgruppe C in Russia. Seidel was present at the massacre in Babi Yar Gorge at the end of September 1941. He says that he himself did not shoot.
I just saw the SD men walking past these criminals with cigar boxes or plates and calling out to them to hand over all their gold and silver, watches and jewellery.
More than 30,000 Jewish men, women and children are murdered by Einsatzgruppe C in just 2 days.
We considered all of that necessary. They were Jews, Bolsheviks. They could only be shot.
Sand is poured over the corpses. The SS is worried about the perpetrators.
We know that some people, say in the Einsatzgruppen, where they were shooting human beings at point-blank range day after day, had breakdowns. They anesthetized themselves with alcohol, and Himmler recognized that.
Shooting is something that's very time-consuming and, above all, psychologically stressful for one's own men. So you feel sorry for the perpetrators who have to do such hard work firing their guns and always having to shoot women and children. That means that something else is needed here. Something that's easier to tolerate, so to speak, and that also works faster.
Killing had to become easier. Another camp is built in Auschwitz from October 1941 onwards. Birkenau, a harmless-sounding name and murderous deception.
Wir haben die
Auschwitz-Birkenau is an extermination and labor camp. 10,000 prisoners have to build it. 9,000 of them die from hunger, cold, and epidemics. Auschwitz is steadily expanded. In the center, Birkenau, with a ramp and the gas chambers. Those who serve here do not have to go to the front.
The
SS leaders, also in Auschwitz, were also relatively young people who rose in the ranks very quickly because their superiors held a high opinion of them. That way, they could advance their careers and quickly gain higher positions.
Hermann Langbein, a communist from Vienna. The SS makes him a so-called functional prisoner, as a typist for the camp doctor. This affords him an insight into the camp hierarchy.
They promoted the little guys if they were good at beating prisoners. They gave them special leave if they did what was expected of them. That was the evil system behind it all.
Hitler wants to deport all Jews from the Reich by the end of 1941. 163,000 people are affected. They are dragged from their homes in broad daylight. As a rule, there are no protests from their neighbors.
So it's absolutely clear that the non-Jewish population in Germany witnesses these deportations. The question is to what extent the German population then knows what will happen to these Germans. Of course, in autumn 41, early 42, we cannot yet assume that they knew that this meant immediate extermination. And in fact, at that time, these deportations did not yet signify immediate extermination.
The destination of the deportation are ghettos in the east: Theresienstadt, Lodz, Warsaw. Hundreds of thousands have to live here under inhumane conditions. In the Warsaw ghetto alone, up to 450,000 Jewish men, women and children. Thousands die of hunger and epidemics. In 1942, the second stage of deportation begins. From the ghettos to the death camps. Who gave the order for the Holocaust and when exactly has not yet been clarified. The only certainty is that the decision was made in 1941, possibly in several stages. Was there a verbal order from Hitler? Or did a radicalization within the SS demanded by him lead to mass murder? The main perpetrators know what they are doing and do not want to leave any traces.
We don't have a written order from Hitler, but this doesn't mean that he did not give the order. This was his way of doing things. He didn't necessarily write things down and then hand them over on pieces of paper. And anyway, one of the fundamental precepts of the final solution is its secrecy. The Holocaust is to be carried out in secret.
Hitler sets the objective. His accomplices have to carry it out. Above all, the SS. The dictator himself never visits a concentration camp. In cattle wagons, the prisoners arrive at Auschwitz.
The train was not quite at a standstill when the carriage doors were ripped open and people started screaming, "Raus, raus, raus, leave luggage in the carriage." Then we jumped out. Men were ordered to come out on the right, women with children on the left, women without children further out to the left.
At the Auschwitz ramp, SS doctors separate the arrivals. There are only two categories: slave labor until death, or the gas chamber.
Nicht Hitler.
It wasn't Hitler, Goering, Goebbels, Himmler, or whatever their names were, who took me away and beat me. No, it was the cobbler, the neighbour, the milkman, the postman. They'd been given a uniform, an armband and a cap with a death's head on top, and they were the master race.
The SS men at Auschwitz know exactly what happens to the people who get out of the wagons at the ramp. How can they live with it?
We are the chosen ones. We're allowed to do this, even if it's difficult. We're saving the German people from the hereditary enemy.
Hans Münch performs human experiments as an SS doctor in Auschwitz. After the war, he's acquitted, mainly because he says he did not take part in selections. Whether this is true can never be clarified. Anita Lasker, a Jewish girl from Breslau, arrives at Birkenau at the age of 18.
I was lucky again that I didn't go straight to the gas chamber.
After her arrival, her hair is cut by other prisoners.
And I told them I played the cello. Fantastic, she says. There's an orchestra here, an ensemble that really needs a cello. I'm told to wait right there. I was already naked with my hair shaved off, and I stood there waiting. For what? I didn't know. She ran off quickly to call the conductor of the orchestra, saying someone has arrived who can play the cello. Suddenly, I became very important, you know.
The orchestra in Auschwitz has a special function for the SS.
Our job was to be at the camp gate every morning and every evening to play marches, because you may know that Birkenau and Auschwitz were surrounded by factories, IG Farben, Buna and so on, and the prisoners from Birkenau and Auschwitz and surrounding camps marched off to work there, and we played marches. Everything has to be neat and tidy after all, doesn't it? It was the same in the morning and in the evening, and we knew very well that as long as they wanted us, we wouldn't go to the gas chamber.
Germany's war economy is growing increasingly weaker. Prisoners are needed as labourers. The SS turns Auschwitz into an industrial site.
Well, from fairly early on in the history of Auschwitz, it was decided to build a huge factory complex at Monowitz, close by, which would manufacture or seek to manufacture Buna, that is synthetic rubber, because the supply problem for the Germans was enormous in World War II.
In Monowitz, Auschwitz III, prisoners work for the chemical company IG Farben. SS Chief Himmler personally looks after the investors from German industry. The fact that the deaths of thousands of forced labourers have been factored in does not bother the business partners in the least. Two mass murderers who get along well together. SS Chief Himmler and Odilo Globocnik. Globocnik is an Austrian, a fanatical anti-Semite, a career Nazi and for a time, Gauleiter of Vienna. After the invasion of Poland, Himmler appoints him SS and police leader in the Lublin district.
Odilo Globocnik
is a kind of model pupil of Heinrich Himmler, always coming up with new and ever more radical ideas about what could be done. Today he would be called a doer. These are the men you need if you want to organize a mass murder, a genocide.
In July 1941, Globocnik has a special camp set up in Travniki, near Lublin. On the site of an old sugar factory, Soviet prisoners of war are trained for service in the concentration camps. Auxiliaries for the Holocaust. Officially, they are volunteers.
This volunteering for work is often simply a question of survival, as in, do I want something to eat the next day or should I starve? That's when people reported to the Travniki. And that was Odilo Globocnik's private group. He used them for everything he needed them for, as additional guards and extra personnel.
The Travniki are faced with the choice of being accessories to murder or starving to death as prisoners. It is from this barracks in Lublin that Globocnik organizes the murder of the Polish Jews. Aktion Reinhard, named after the assassinated SS general Reinhard Heydrich. The crime scenes are Treblinka, Sobibor, and Belzec.
There is no forced labor. There is no industry like IG Farben, which produces something and then says it needs workers. Instead, it's absolutely clear that anyone who goes to a camp like Belzec, Sobibor or Treblinka only goes there because they're going to be murdered.
Sobibor. The gas chambers are located beside the railway platform. The victims are told they will be resettled. Only a few dozen SS men and Travniki helpers run the camp. They murder more than 200,000 people.
When we came in Sobibor, they picked me out to work, but not my brother.
Chaim Engel, then 26, has to help dispose of the victims' belongings. He never sees his brother again.
My main work was to also separating clothes and working with that. And when I separated the clothes, I found later my brother's clothes and pictures from our family.
Chaim Engel's brother has to undress with the others immediately after arrival, ostensibly to take a shower. They are then murdered in the gas chamber with engine exhaust.
This is a concept that, of course, cannot be surpassed in terms of radicalism, because it actually makes it clear that this is all about extermination. I once described that as the core of the Holocaust. That's what the camps were there for.
Sobibor. Today, a memorial. Only the outlines of the camp are still visible. The SS blew up and leveled the buildings and the fence to remove traces. Deputy Camp Commandant Johann Niemann takes photographs in Sobibor. His pictures only show the everyday life of the perpetrators, no victims.
The Germans who come there are actually simple men. Very few of them actually have a high school diploma. They are people who are just part of the teams. They don't somehow stand out by being pathological Jew haters and mass murderers. With some of these perpetrators, there is real sadism, and with others, there's simply the attitude of, well, if he doesn't obey, then I'll shoot him, or I'll beat him with the whip, because it doesn't matter anyway, whether I kill him now, or whether he's gassed 10 minutes later, what's the problem? And they sort of grow into these activities until they become normal for them.
Only very few traces remain of the victims. Everyday objects are found during excavations, hastily packed for the alleged resettlement. The SS robs the murdered victims, taking everything that they can turn into money. The majority of the victims of Aktion Reinhardt come from the Polish ghettos. Images from the Warsaw Ghetto. Everyday people die here. Every day trains travel to the death camps. April 1943. The Ghetto Uprising. With courage born of despair, Jewish fighters defend themselves against German terror. For weeks on end. Eventually, the SS quell the uprising, destroy the ghetto, and murder all of its inhabitants.
It meant that the Jews who knew that they were going to die had made the decision to die fighting, to die with a gun in their hand rather than just meekly going to the trains and that would lead them to Treblinka. It was an enormous kind of symbol for people actually all over Europe, all over the world.
Treblinka, the youngest of the 3 extermination camps of Aktion Reinhardt. Here too, there are no selections. Everyone who arrives is murdered immediately. Only a few dozen Jewish men are left alive. They have to take the bodies out of the gas chambers and burn them.
The removal of corpses is something that is done entirely by the prisoners, and the Germans stay completely out of it. Firstly, because the psychological strain is unbearable. Secondly, it is simply the heaviest physical work. And thirdly, of course, it is also incredibly dirty work.
August 2nd, 1943. Explosions at Treblinka. The Jewish forced laborers attack the SS. About 200 of them manage to escape. Almost all are recaptured and killed. The SS operates Treblinka for another 3 weeks. Then, the camp is razed to the ground to cover up all traces of the mass murder here as well.
The uprising in Treblinka was significant because the Aktion Reinhardt was coming to an end anyway. Treblinka was running out of people to murder, effectively, and this was one of the reasons that Aktion Reinhardt fell to pieces. But the Germans were also very edgy and worried about the fact that there had been an uprising in Treblinka and that a number of people had escaped. First of all, they'd be able to tell the world about what they'd seen.
A little later, Sobibor is also due to be shut down. Death looms for the forced laborers who are still captive there.
There were plans to make some uprising in the camp, but there was not courage to do the thing. Till one day a transport came with Russian prisoners of war, and they picked out about 30 of them to work in camp. And it happened to be one of them was a captain in the Russian army. And when he came out and we told him what is going on here, he wants to run away the first day.
October 14th, 1943. Under the leadership of a Jewish Red Army soldier, the prisoners begin their uprising. Chaim Engel and his later wife Selma, also a prisoner at Sobibor, join in.
My wife brought me a knife, a kitchen knife, a regular kitchen knife. I jabbed him with the knife and I said, "That's for my father, for my brother, for all the Jews to kill." That's all.
And finally he came out and he was full with blood. So I tried to clean him a little bit. I thought, oh, and we ran away. I better, he's clean. I had no idea what was going on, where we would go, what we would do. I had no idea. I know only one thing. We have to run and run and run and run and run so much as possible.
12 SS men are killed. The insurgents shoot their way out with captured weapons. 200 flee into the forest. More than 40 survive the end of the war.
The prisoners who did not manage to escape were shot by the SS. The SS decided that continuing to operate the camp made no sense. This was now the second uprising that had here. In the general government, all the Jews had been murdered. So they really didn't have any more work to do. They had Auschwitz now. It was fully functional.
Mission accomplished.
In October 1943, the Aktion Reinhardt comes to an end. Within 21 months, at least 1.8 million people are murdered. In Belzec, Sobibor and Treblinka. Almost 1/3 of all those killed in the Holocaust. More than in Auschwitz. The perpetrators keep meticulous records.
The economic profit of Aktion Reinhardt was actually incredibly small. There was a complete liquidation. Everything was collected, everything was sold, and Globocnik then drew up a balance sheet. And he came up with the sum of 178 million Reichsmarks. Of course, the costs for personnel, for the construction of the extermination camps, for the trains of the Reichsbahn, which don't run for free, all had to be deducted from that. That meant that in the end, less than 50 million of the 178 million remained. The Jews were not murdered for the purpose of robbing them. The robbery took place incidentally in order to cover costs. So we cannot speak of murder with intent to rob. It wasn't that.
Trains with victims arrive at Auschwitz almost daily. Here too, the SS forces prisoners into so-called Sonderkommandos. They have to take the corpses out of the gas chambers and burn them. Photos taken in secret reveal the work of one of these Sonderkommandos.
You sat there and you waited. Maybe you'll still be alive tomorrow, but probably not. And while we were playing waltzes, people were being burned. We were playing, and there was smoke coming out. That was Auschwitz.
For the SS personnel at Auschwitz, mass murder becomes routine. The diary entries of SS Dr. Johann Paul Kremer offer rare insights into the everyday life of the perpetrators. September 20th, 1942. Listen to the concert of the prisoners' band this Sunday afternoon from 3 to 6 p.m. in glorious sunshine. Kapellmeister conductor of the Warsaw State Opera, 80 musicians, roast pork for lunch. October 18th, 1942, attended the 11th special operation in cold and wet weather this Sunday morning. Ghastly scenes with 3 women begging for dear life.
Ultimately, these criminals are human beings too. They're never 100% perpetrators, and that of course means that they somehow have to have a private life after doing their work. And this discrepancy is basically the normality of the Holocaust.
Torturing prisoners during the day and listening to classical music after work. SS Dr. Josef Mengele, for instance, loves the romantic sounds of Robert Schumann.
Someone like Mengele knew that Schumann had written a piece called Träumerei. That means he wasn't a complete idiot. And he came into the block, that could always happen, and he wanted to hear the Träumerei by Schumann, and it was in my repertoire. So Anita, play Träumerei. I remember playing it as fast as I could, so that he'd leave again.
Female prisoners, like Anita Lasker, are guarded by SS women. Like the men, they also want to impress their superiors by being tough. Some are notorious for their brutality. Maria Mandl, from Austria, for example, the head guard at Auschwitz.
I remember one thing about Maria Mandl, who was a very good-looking woman, by the way. When a transport arrived that was supposed to go to the gas chamber, and women with babies go to gas chambers anyway, don't they? She fell in love with a little child and took this child and walked around for days with that pretty little child. And one day she sent the child to the gas chamber. That was Maria Mandl. Don't ask me to explain what kind of a brain such a woman had. I don't know.
I don't know.
The female guards are not officially members of the SS, but employees in the so-called SS Gefolge. They are a total of about 3,500 female concentration camp guards.
They were almost worse than the men. Yes. You know, that was at a time when women didn't have as many rights as they have today. Imagine a simple woman from some village being given boots, a uniform, a revolver, a dog. Suddenly she's somebody. I'd say the women were almost worse than the men.
Fürstenberg, Brandenburg, just under 100 kilometers north of Berlin. On the outskirts of the small town, the SS maintains the Ravensbrück concentration camp, the largest camp for women only. At Ravensbrück, female SS guards are trained for service in other camps.
They saw this as a regular job. This was a normal way to be spending their lives. They felt superior. When they were out and about in the town in Fürstenberg, they walked with a sort of, skip in their step. A lot of the locals saw them and were now frightened of them because they used to walk around in their uniforms and go into the shops and so on. So they had felt a sense of power and a sense of superiority. It attracted people who liked that kind of environment, and it attracted people who had sadistic tendencies, without any doubt.
Wir haben diese schwerste Aufgabe in Liebe zu unserem Volk getan.
In the world of SS Chief Himmler, no mercy is shown to female prison. The SS women at Ravensbrück prefer to torture their victims in the cell block, the so-called bunker.
In the bunker, they had one permission from Himmler to beat prisoners, and with what was called the Prügelstrafe, where they laid them on a kind of horse-type structure. The women were made to lean forward onto this structure, and there were guards and prisoners themselves were ordered to beat the women for a certain number of thrashes. Again, Himmler had himself laid down the rules in many cases for this, specifically how many thrashes were allowed.
Located only a few kilometers from the Ravensbrück concentration camp is the SS clinic Hohenlychen. The head doctor here is called Karl Gebhardt.
Die heutige Generation, sie trägt Deutschlands Schicksal.
Gebhardt is a childhood friend and the personal physician of Heinrich Himmler. The two men trust each other. Two illegitimate children of Himmler are born at Gebhardt's maternity ward in Hohenlychen.
He saw himself as a very grand, some of these Nazi doctors had huge status within the system and were very arrogant. They had a lot of power and they were given a lot of status. And so his clinic was very famous. It was used to treat top SS men, but also people coming in from the front who needed his expert surgery. But he was absolutely part of the Nazi system.
After the assassination of SS General Reinhard Heydrich in 1942, Himmler sends his personal physician to Prague, telling him to save Heydrich's life. The patient has undergone emergency surgery and seems to be out of danger. But then, Heydrich dies of blood poisoning. Penicillin might have saved him, but only the Allies have that. The Germans only have sulfonamide, but Gebhardt doesn't administer any to Heydrich. In the Ravensbrück concentration camp, Karl Gebhardt conducts experiments with sulfonamide. He cuts prisoners' calves and sews cloth or wooden splinters into the wounds to cause inflammation. Human experimentation. Several prisoners die.
The bottom line was that they really didn't prove very much at all with these sulfonamide injections. But they didn't stop there, because what you have a very strong sense of when you read and you learn about the Nazi medical experimentation is you see this experimentation for experimentation's sake. They get a hunger for it.
Photos taken secretly by prisoners at Ravensbrück. The mutilated leg of Maria Kazmierczuk, a victim of Gebhardt's experiments. She survives the war and later testifies against him. In 1944, the war is lost. Hitler's enemies are advancing towards Germany from the east and west. The SS want to eliminate the traces of their crimes. Thousands of exhausted prisoners from the remaining camps are driven on the so-called death marches into the interior of the Reich. Those who cannot go any further are shot. The destination of many death marches is the concentration camp of Bergen-Belsen. Epidemics and malnutrition claim thousands of lives there. Anita Lasker is transferred here from Auschwitz at the end of 1944.
There was also a rumor going around that they were going to blow up the camps to destroy all the evidence and so forth. We really did sit there waiting for the end. And suddenly we hear this announcement. Yes, that the English are standing in front of the main gate. We really thought we were dreaming.
April 15th, 1945. The liberation of Bergen-Belsen. One day later, Anita Lasker reports on the Holocaust in the BBC's German program.
The Auschwitz prisoners, the few who remained, all fear that the world will not believe what happened there. There, living, healthy people were thrown alive into the fire.
Unlike in most of the camps, the SS guards in Bergen-Belsen have not cleared out. Now they have to recover their victims. An estimated 100,000 Germans participated in the Holocaust as perpetrators. Not even a tenth of them are held accountable. Some escape their responsibility by committing suicide. Like Odilo Globocnik, head of Aktion Reinhardt. SS Dr. Karl Gebhardt is captured by the Allies while on the run and is put on trial.
Military Tribunal 1 sentences you, Karl de Gebhardt, to death by hanging, and may God have mercy on your soul.
The head guard at Auschwitz, Maria Mandl, is also sentenced to death.
I think they were aware that other people outside of Germany would consider what they were doing as wrong. But in a sense, what the Nazis had been able to do was to create a kind of world of moral inversion, where one's moral duty was only to fellow Germans, and everyone else was outside the world of moral obligation. So the morality is turned upside down.
You don't need fanatical or pathological mass murderers or highly ideologized Nazis. It also works with other perpetrators. Other types of people can be transformed into mass murderers in just the same way. That's actually what I find so terrifying about the Holocaust, that it actually works with normal people, that a whole society looks the other way, or even thinks it's good, that everyone benefits from it, that no one has any problem with it. That's actually the true lesson from the Holocaust for me.
More than 90% of the SS perpetrators go unpunished. Even after